Greetings, folks, and welcome to the Electromaker podcast. This is your midweek roundup of all things Maker and embedded and lovely, albeit in audio format. Now, this week's show, we cover a wide variety of things, including the Zimablade, which is the follow-up to the Zimaboard, which we talked about a while ago, which is a single board server, an x86 single board server with a few really nice features, and it's in the pre-launch stage on CrowdSupply right now. It's something we're probably going to come back to quite a bit, I love the Zimaboard. I've been really enjoying using it, but we're probably going to be doing a little bit of Zimablade content coming up. It's not confirmed completely as yet, but I'm hoping that I'll have one in my hands and I'll be able to do some things with it and actually show you how it works, a little bit like I did with the Zimaboard on the Electromaker Show. But as well as that, we have some fantastic projects, and a couple of Arduino projects, one using the old school Arduino, I say old school, but the revision 3 of the Uno, but playing audio using an ATmega 328P chip and nothing else except that and a speaker, and an amplifier circuit if you want it. But the point is, it's 32 kilobytes of flash is what it has, and yet you're storing and playing audio from it. It's a fantastic project. An Arduino Nano ESP32 project, and a few other interesting things like that. I will say at the very start of the show, the first thing we talk about this week is Jumperless, which is an amazing project. It is a solderless and jumper wire-less breadboard. And the one thing I did want to sort of impress upon you is that I do my best, obviously, as I always do in the show, to say what it is, but you really need to see this one with your own eyes to get an idea as to why it is so nice. It's just such a lovely design. It is essentially a PCB with a custom 3D printed breadboard on top. I think it's 3D printed, and underneath that 3D printed breadboard are a bunch of RGB LEDs and of course a bunch of physical connections. Now I'll go into more detail in a moment, so I won't totally go through what this is, but in short, if you imagine a breadboard, but under every single pin of the breadboard is an analog connection that you can address through software. So you can put components on this board and not do any wiring at all. It is a jumperless breadboard. But it is a PCB with a plastic breadboard on top of it with RGB LEDs underneath and a port at the top for an Arduino Uno and a few other things. I just wanted to really impress upon you that if you want to see this and everything else that's on every single show we have, you can find in the show notes of this podcast, and you can take the link straight to it from there and see it with your own eyes. Because yeah, this is just a wonderful project. It's a really nice idea, and it's something that I think people have fiddled with in their brain before. What if you took a breadboard and made it completely jumperless, made it something that you could, I think people have loved the idea of digital routing in electronics for a long time. It's been a thing in music for a short while. There are digital routers for people that have big synthesizer music setups, just like there are analog matrix routers for that exact reason. This is the DIY electronics version of that. Now, I hope it isn't too confusing me going into that detail before I talk about it on the show, but I thought I would do that now rather than drop in at the time, since it is literally the first thing I talk about on this week's show. As always, if you do enjoy this podcast, do consider heading to electromaker.io/shop and seeing what we have on offer there. The shop is our primary source of making any money. So if you are interested in supporting this show, then that is the best thing that you can do. We do not run any adverts on our podcast. We are essentially a shop that has decided to make a lot of podcast and video content, and I'm very, very glad that we have, because I get to spend most of my life doing that. But if you would like to support us, whether you're getting your first Arduino gift set for someone who might be getting into the hobby or looking for something very specific, do consider giving us a look. And with all of that said, let's get on with the main show, shall we? We're going to start this week's show by looking at Jumperless, which takes the idea of a breadboard, which is a solderless electronics prototyping platform that allows you to make connections by jumping wires between things, and says, what's the next evolution of that? What if we take something solderless and make it jumperless as well? This is, in a way, a software-defined breadboard. So this is a project from Kevin Santo Capuccio, also known as Architoith is Flux on the Electromaker website. And it is a solderless, jumperless breadboard. Let's get that out of the way straight away. There's nothing in the name that is false here. The breadboard part works exactly as you would imagine a breadboard does. Power runs along both sides here, and these lines go perpendicular to that, just like every breadboard you've ever used. But as you can see, there are RGB LEDs behind them, behind each hole, and these show you exactly exactly how these things are routed. Now, it's far better for me to show you than for me to just say it to you, and I will in a moment show you a video of this. There's a few other nice features as well, though. An Arduino Nano can fit in the pins just here, and it's controllable using Wowkey, which is an online simulator for different boards. If you ever messed around with the stuff, I mean, I used it to mess around with some PiPico stuff once just to sort of learn what it was. It's a very good simulator. However, Kevin has created a Wowkey bridge, which bridges between Wowkey and Jumperless so that you can use the browser-based visual GUI to make the connections on your board. Again, it's much easier to see this, but just before I do, there's a couple of extra features you should be aware of. So, namely, Jumperless has a ton of voltage current sensing, so the RGBs underneath each row can show a ton of information about what's going on with your circuit, i.e. how much power things are using. It has 2 buffered digital to analog converters, more on that later. There's 2 different versions of this board, and you may want to wait before you get one if you're a musician. 4 buffered 12-bit analog to digital converters, 2 INA2119, 2 19 current and voltage sensor ICs, and 5 separate GPIOs that can be routed to anywhere on the breadboard or the Nano header. Again, one thing that is I will mention now is I will check to make sure this is accurate, but I think both revision 2, which we're looking at here, and revision 3, which is coming soon, have the INA219. One of them is connected to the plus or minus 8 volt output of the DAC, so that you can keep an eye on that the entire time, whereas the other one can be routed to anywhere on this board. So, use it to probe the pins on an unknown IC, or for some automated fuzzing, or to read-write EEPROM chips, or to help guide you through converting a schematic to a real circuit, or do whatever the hell you want with it. And being able to do a huge amount with this project is something that is clearly very important to Kevin, its creator. As he says later in this write-up of it, not only is he putting a huge amount into making this thing a out-of-the-box success for people who want to use it, he's even willing to give people extra parts for free if they're worried they're going to burn through them, and as you'll see in a moment, even down to the way he's packaging these things up is a lot of thought. But anyway, I have waffled enough. Let's see this thing working. So this is one of the videos on the page that I think just outlines neatly very well what this does in its simplest sense, okay? The top right of the screen here is Wowkey, which is the browser-based simulator I talked about before. On the top left is the bridging software that Kevin has provided that bridges Jumperless to the browser via web USB. You'll have to have a browser that supports that for this to work. And what you're seeing is digital connections made in the browser showing up on the breadboard, so you can see the RGB LEDs have lit up behind the resistor and the LED matrix part that he has there that he's testing, and you can see that essentially he's going through and just testing each cable to see what does what. It says on the project page here that this was a genuine thing. This was a part he had no datasheet for, and he wanted to just test all the pins, and this was the quickest way to do it, and it was a perfect way of showing off what Jumperless can do in its simplest form. Now, again, the RGB LEDs can give a wide range of information, but I just think this is a really simple way of showing exactly how it works, and there's no surprise that the maker has chosen this video to show it off. So, a couple of extra things to pay attention to. The board itself runs on an RP2040, and the firmware is completely open source. So not only is the firmware available, you can contribute to it by making fixes and changes, or you can just completely roll your own firmware depending on how you want to do it. And I feel like it would have been silly of me not to mention this as the very first thing I said, but this is actually a fully analog system. These are analog crosspoint switches that it uses. There's no simulating going on here. It uses a simulator in the browser, yes, but the actual board itself is analog, and it is also a breadboard. It works as that as well. You can set this up and you just use it with normal jumpers if you want. Now, the maker does also mention that this is a project of love. It's meant to be fun to use, but you should temper your expectations. This is not a high-level engineering tool in many ways. It's not a precision instrument. The connections it makes go through the CH446Q crosspoint switches, and they do have some resistance, and there are a few things that you can do about that, but you can use it as a regular you can use it as a regular breadboard, as it mentions just here. Now, there is so much more to talk about with Jumperless, and I wish I had the time to do so. This is one of the most detailed walkthroughs of how a product comes to life I have ever seen, and it also is a tutorial as to how you can make your own from scratch, and these things are sold as kits, and we'll come onto that in just a moment. I hope I gave a good overview as to what this thing is capable of doing, just by mentioning the fact that it has these separate ADCs and DACs and GPIOs that you can use for various things. This is a Swiss Army knife. I know that term is used so often, but this is a Swiss Army knife of breadboarding in many ways, and it is a really interesting idea. there's one of the things I do want to mention just before, I know it's such a small thing, but it really kind of appealed to me. Even things like the project box has gone through iterations and the idea of how it all fits together. The Jumperless t-shirt came into being because they didn't want to waste packing material. They didn't want to have packing materials you just throw away and go into landfill, so they made t-shirts to wrap each one in inside the box, inside the foam, so that it had a bit of extra protection. It's just a really, really nice idea. The maker is clearly wanting this to be something that people love and use for a long time, and this is a labor of love for people who love making things. Yeah, if you are interested in finding out more about this, of course there'll be a link in the description, and from this project you can link through to the Tindy page, and these kits are $299, and there is a fully assembled version which costs a little bit more. Fully assembled adds $90. Revision 3, which hasn't shipped just yet, but there are 14 of them in stock. So if you want the fully assembled version, it's going to be $428, which adds a bit of cash to it. Now, I know there are some people who are going to see this and be kind of like, oh, that's a lot more than I was expecting. This is a project by a single person. And I think we are so used to having insanely cheap things that we forget that it does cost a lot to put something, especially this dense, together. This is not meant to be a cheap tool that you get from AliExpress, which might be as good as the super expensive version. This is a completely custom designed thing. It is a work of art in and of itself. And so, yeah, I absolutely understand some of you will be like, what, like $430 for a breadboard? Well, no, this is $430 for a huge amount of work done over a long time, and work that will continue to go on. You're not buying a single device here, you're buying into an idea. Anyway, that's my little soapbox moment for makers who are not part of huge companies and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you have to buy one of these. I am saying that this was just a no-brainer for me. This is my birthday present to me for this year, once I'm done with the show for this week, I'll be ordering one of the Rev 3 versions. Not only because the thing itself is wonderful, but he mentions in the product page that the Rev 3 version might be better for people who are interested in synthesizers and Euroracks, like somebody who makes a YouTube show. And I fully intend to wire it up to the madness that I have behind me just out of shot. So, that's Jumperless. I could talk about it a lot more. I'm not the only person who's excited about this. It's in the Hackaday prize pool this year. It's been entered into that, and I really hope you win. You certainly deserve to. And I've already talked about this for way too long, so you can find out more about Jumperless in the description of this video. Up next, we have a duo of Arduino projects that work in very different ways. The first uses an Arduino Uno R3, which uses the original ATmega 328P chip that the Arduino Uno has been rocking for the last 10 years, right up until the recently released Arduino Uno R4. And by the way, just for those of you that might wonder, the Arduino Uno R3 isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Arduino made it very clear to us that the original ATmega versions will stay available for the for the foreseeable future. But the new versions are well worth getting. They're very cheap. They're still 5-volt tolerant. There's many good reasons to get the new Arduino Uno versions. But the R3 has a special place in many people's hearts because it might be the first thing that they worked with. And yes, it was very limited, but there's a huge amount that you could do with it. And now you can add sound playback to that list. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's nothing crazy. I mean, you've been able to make sounds with an Arduino Uno since the very early days. You can PWM, make sine waves out of it, all this kind of stuff. But I'm talking about storing and playing back audio on the 32 kilobyte flash that comes with the with the Arduino Uno, with the ATmega 328P chip. As you can see here, this is just a speaker plugged into an Arduino Uno. But if we head through to the actual page itself, this is a Scott W. Harden project. And of course, this is the Arduino blog. This is where I read it originally. You'll see that there is a lot more to this than meets the eye. This is an Arduino Uno, and as I said, this is plugged into just a speaker. This is exactly the same circuit, the difference being there's an operational amplifier here to make it slightly louder, but so that's legible spoken audio on the 32 kilobytes of storage that the Arduino has, and that's not even including the program required to play that sound. This is an incredible thing. This is really, you can tell that I'm a little bit excited because I'm tripping over my words ever so slightly. This is an amazing software feat of sound encoding because it's a very fine balance. In theory, you could play a huge amount of audio with a very small amount of flash memory, but it wouldn't be legible. It wouldn't make any decent sound. And even this, if you try to convert music to play through this, it would probably sound utterly dreadful. But spoken numbers are something that we are so familiar with that you can play around with it quite a lot and get something that still actually sounds pretty good. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, interestingly, this is not your average Arduino project. You're not going to download the IDE in a library and just have numbers speak to you. Or are you? Well, as it happens, it's not ready for public consumption yet, but if you do read through this blog post, which I urge you to do, there's a lot more to it than I'm going to have time to talk about today. Number Speaker is a GitHub project that Scott is putting together, which basically turns this into an Arduino library where you can speak numbers with an AVR 328P chip on your Arduino Uno. Now, this blog goes on to, it starts with the Arduino Uno and the Number Speaker. It goes on to more modern AVR chips and goes through to even playing music through them. It sounds decent, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. I urge you to read this in detail. It really is worth doing so. But in short, this Python script here resamples the audio and turns it into a C header, which is just data, and it programs that into the memory of the AVR chip. AVR, if I understand this correctly, because this is, I'm not going to lie, a little bit above my level of understanding of programming AVRs, has a way that you can program into the flash memory values that can then be read out of that flash memory at runtime. And that's what this is doing. It's creating an array in the program memory, and then when you want to play the audio, you set up all the pins for output, and then you loop through the size of the audio output and play the correct part of that programmed memory array. Now, of course, some of you may have immediately thought of using external memory for that, and this is something that has been mentioned too. Here, there is versions of external flash chips. This one has 4 megabytes of flash and is available on Mauser. And however, some thought must be placed into how to program the flash memory with the audio waveform on your computer. In that, the way it's being done right now is it's creating a C header file. You would need to move everything from that C header file into the flash. And if the C header file is bigger than the flash of the chip already, then you're going to have to find a separate solution for flashing it to that chip. I assume is what that means. Again, above my pay grade of knowledge here, but that's kind of where I love to be. There's a small section on audio amplification as well, and then it moves on to, as mentioned, the more modern AVR microcontrollers. The AVR 64DD32, as it says, it has 64 kilobytes of flash memory. There's even a version that has 128 kilobytes. And in short, this is the same thing, but better. It gives you the updated code. And just as a final flurry, YouTube has a surprisingly large number of videos of people beeping the coffin dance song from an Arduino. So here's my video response playing the actual song audio encoded as an 8 kilohertz 8-bit waveform on an AVR 64DD32 microcontroller. And I will leave you with this. If you are interested in finding out more, head to the link in the description. I love seeing the original Arduino Uno hardware being repurposed to even more and more crazy things. I thought machine learning and audio on an Arduino Uno were both things that were just impossible and crazy, and they are both things that can be done now. Up next, we have a duo of Arduino ESP32 Nano Arduino Nano ESP32 videos, which both interestingly use display screens with quite high refresh rates and resolutions, but do very, very different things. The first is from Volus Projects, who's someone that we haven't featured on the Electromaker Show for a long time, but we actually featured Volus on one of our earlier shows. And if I jump through to the channel, you will see that in the time since we featured Volus, he has been very, very busy. His channel is absolutely chock full of a huge amount of different microcontrollers and different displays. He seems to specialize a lot in different displays and different GUIs. The channel has gone from strength to strength since the first time that we've seen it. But specifically the one that I wanted to look at today is something that I saw on the Geeky Gadgets website. That's what I'm going to link in the description because that's where I saw it for the first time. It is a breadboard game using an Arduino Nano ESP32 and a GC9A01 circular display. And that's more or less all I'm going to say about it because the video itself covers everything you need to know about it. If you are interested in the ESP32, if you're interested in how it can work with displays, and crucially, if you're interested in how to make a retro game handheld on a breadboard and how to program your own game using it, this goes through pretty much everything. Volus has made this all quite open and shows exactly how he's done everything, and his channel is a treasure trove for all different kinds of things to do with GUI now. It had been a while since I checked it, and yeah, there's just a huge amount. It's amazing. So yes, Volos Projects was the first one I wanted to mention. This tells you everything you need to know to get started. He also steps through the code and also the setup configuration for the screen as well. As I previously mentioned, I'm going to leave a link to this article just because this is where I found it, but you can just click on the video just here if you want to open his channel and subscribe to it. And in the same vein, another video with an ESP32 and a display. Now, a quick bit of description, because this is a very short video, and without the sound, it's hard to get any context as to what's going on here. But this is an ESP32 driving a screen, and this video is a short follow-up to their review of the ESP32 version of the Arduino Nano, which is definitely worth a watch. It's just not something that would fit into this week's show. We already covered the release. However, they noticed that running a SPI screen was very slow, and that's because it was bit banging. But there is a way that you can set it up as a hardware peripheral, because the ESP32 S3 does have that. Last time I used Arduino GFX, the default constructor was for soft SPI, soft SPI. Maybe that explains the show refresh. For hardware SPI with this display, I've gotten away with 80 megahertz on a custom board. On a breadboard stick, I got 40 megahertz just to be safe. And yes, if you change the SPI speed, as you're about to see, things get a lot faster. Anyway, I'm almost certain we have featured Atomic 14 on the Electromaker Show before, but just in case we didn't, this is another one of those treasure trove channels. You really don't want to miss this one. There's a bunch of fantastic stuff on here. I remember way back when, and again, I don't know if this is something that would have happened with the Electromaker Show. I don't even know if I was making the Electromaker Show back then. When the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect came out, which is the version of the Arduino just after the Raspberry Pi Pico appeared with the RP2040 Silicon, Arduino almost immediately released their own version with a coprocessor, which was an ESP32 that was just being used for wireless connectivity. Somewhere way back in the history of this channel is a video that Atomic made showing how you can unleash the power of the ESP32 on that Arduino board. I think that's where I first discovered Atomic. But there's an absolutely amazing amount of stuff on here. I will be linking this video in the description because this is just a little nugget of information, but this channel is absolutely full of them. I'm sure you will love it. If you are enjoying the Electromaker Show, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to check that you are subscribed to the Electromaker YouTube channel. Once you do subscribe, you'll notice this box turns into a drop-down, and you can click the drop-down here and select All here. Now, that just gives you notifications in the YouTube window. When your browser is at YouTube, that's when you will get your notifications, and they will show up here in the top right. And as you can see, this channel I have notifications on only for Electromaker, so you see that these are Electromaker episodes, and of course the Product of the Week videos as well. What would also be great is if you could go down under this video that you're watching right now and click the I like this button. Not only does it tell us that you like it, which is nice to know, but it tells YouTube that you like it as well and makes it far more likely they will recommend it to other people who are watching the same kind of things that you are. However, for those of you that wish to support us in a slightly more concrete way, you can head to the Electromaker shop. That is electromaker.io/shop, and you will find everything that we sell there. Electromaker is primarily a shop before anything else. I've been doing the Electromaker Show for a couple of years, but we have never turned on advertising on YouTube. We just make our money from the shop. And so if you're thinking of buying anything, as you see from the name scrolling across the top of the screen, we have pretty much everything from everyone, from your first Arduino or Raspberry Pi kit for yourself or a friend, through to some quite high-level stuff for engineering, embedded engineers, as it were. If you're looking for 10,000 of something very specific, it's always worth having a look here, because you can get in touch with our store that way as well with more specific questions. But yes, if you have been enjoying the show, please do take a moment to browse the shop just to see if anything jumps out to you. It is the primary way that our show gets supported. Speaking of the Electromaker Show, let's get back to it. Now, on last week's show, we started a contest for the Latte Panda Sigma. Now, this is one of the biggest giveaways we have ever done, and for that reason, we've decided to extend this competition just a little bit further and widen it out so it's easier for more people to enter. Now, the Latte Panda Sigma, if you'd like to find out more about it, was our product of the week, and that came out, I think, last week. But Robin Mitchell, our in-house gadget guru, can tell you everything you need to know about it, and there's a fantastic article that goes with it that's linked in this video's description. But in short, it is a very powerful little single-board computer. They call it a single-board server, and it does have dual Ethernet ports on it, but the thing itself is powerful. It's more powerful than my old main computer used to be, and that wasn't all that long ago. And yeah, it's a wildly powerful thing. It's something that I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on, because one of the things I've wondered for a while is just how small can you go to have an in-house server, but that can do some beefy tasks, like things to do with AI image generation or text generation. How easy is it to set it up with a GPU and all that kind of stuff? These are the kind of things that I'd love to test. Anyway, for now, you can win one of these, and the way to enter it is the same as always. I talked about this on last week's show, but just in case you are new, every Electromaker competition is the same. You need to be subscribed to our YouTube channel, although we're going to open this out to all of our different social network things. So subscribe on YouTube channel or following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whichever one it is. And whether you're commenting on this video or replying to one of our social media posts, you need to let us know what you would do with the Latte Panda Sigma if you won it, and leave the hashtag Sigma. And we will go through all of those hashtags on all of our different platforms and make sure that no one is entering multiple times, and choose a winner at random very, very soon. So yes, there's now more time to enter this competition, and if you would like to find out more about the Latte Panda Delta, head to the link in the description of this video and you can find our product of the week along with the product of the week video. It is time for funding website things, and as I said at the very top of the show, we have a very interesting pre-launch project on CrowdSupply to talk about. And if you remember just a few weeks ago, I was talking about this. This is the Zimaboard. It is a single board server. It is x86, so you could run Windows on it if you like, or you can run whatever Linux distribution you want. After all, x86 makes it easy. But I have been using it. This is the first time I've unplugged it since I did my review of it, actually. I have been using it as my simple home server. I'm not doing anything crazy with it. I'm using the stock Casa OS that Icewhale, the device makers, created, which is basically a wrapper for Docker images. It's a very easy to use GUI if you don't want to roll your own Docker system, and I've been using it as a file manager and a media server for a while now, and I have zero complaints, which is why it's so exciting that the spiritual successor to this will be coming soon, and it looks like it's going to be even better. So we find ourselves on CrowdSupply. For those of you that aren't familiar, think Kickstarter, but just for very awesome hardware projects. And this is a pre-launch page. A pre-launch page basically means this will be coming soon. You will be able to crowdfund it soon, but there is no way of doing so yet, and there's no price attached to this yet. So I'm not hiding it from you, I just don't know. And what I do know is I see one thing immediately that I like about this that was maybe slightly lacking with this, and that is customization. There were several versions of the Zimaboard that you could get at different price points, but the first thing about this I really like is that I could get this thing in its most bare bones state and get it up and running today. Why? Well, because I have some spare RAM lying around. Yes, as you can see, there is a SO-DIMM slot here, and as the specifications say down here, it is compatible with up to 16 gigabytes of DDR4 or DDR3 RAM, which is very nice to know, because I happen to have sticks of DDR3 RAM, I think, in my old and sadly dead desktop computer over there from way back when that I've been wondering what to do with. Well, probably the first thing I'm going to do is salvage some of that RAM. There's a lot of other things to like here that are still things that were on the original Zimaboard, but are going to be very useful. Things like the PCI slot on the side, the mini display port for output if you do want to attach a screen to it, although of course that might not be something that you want or need to do. And there is also the you also get USB 3.0 and a USB-C port, which can be used for power, but also for display and data. I think I've already mentioned the mini display port. You get a single Ethernet port, which is quite interesting. The Zimaboard had two. This is still a single board server. I'm not sure for the difference there. From my perspective, it makes no difference whatsoever. I was only using a single Ethernet port anyway. You also get the SATA connectors, and of course, as the Zimaboard did, you'll probably get the Y connectors with it, so you can attach a lot more stuff to it. If I remember correctly, there's an obscene amount of storage you could attach to this, well, way over 400 terabytes worth of storage if you wanted to use this thing as a NAS, which is one of the things that they are suggesting that you do use it for. Now, I'm going to gloss over the specs for now because we will be coming back to this when this thing launches. It's an Intel Celeron version. Sorry, it is an Intel Celeron CPU with a number of versions, a quad-core option and a dual-core option. Again, until this thing launches, I'm going to stay off the full stats. If you'd like to find them, of course, this will be linked in the description of the video, but it doesn't make much sense for me to use up so much time on more than one show to go through all of these stats in a huge amount of detail, because I will be doing that in a future show. And if all things go the way I want them to, I'll actually have a Zimablade not long after they become available to do things with. That is absolutely unconfirmed. This is me saying that I want that to happen rather than knowing that it will. But yeah, if I do, I'll be very happy to play with them. Now, a couple of things that you're seeing here. Obviously, this looks like a real-time clock battery. Very, very nice. And the thing itself is really, really compact. That's one of the first things I thought about it when I saw this, is that the board itself is very compact. It would be very easy to put this in a custom mount if you wanted to, but the mounting box itself looks fantastic. And not only that, since this is such an easy thing to stack like this, I wonder how many of these you could stack using PCI. You could certainly attach other things to it, which is something I'm going to come on to in a moment, one of the things I'm very excited about. So, as mentioned, one of the things they say that you could do with this is use it as a NAS, and 154 terabytes of storage. So I did go a little bit up by saying 400 terabytes. I don't know why I pulled that figure out. I must have been thinking of something else. But yes, even so, 154 terabytes of personal storage for a DIY NAS is an absurd amount. But that's not probably what I would use it for. Don't get me wrong, I'd attach a lot of storage to it, but this is the thing that excites me a lot. The idea of being able to attach this to a GPU, and fans of Jeff Geerling will know that you can attach GPUs to a bunch of different single board computers. But the fact that they're just showing this working is something that appeals to me greatly. Because if this is something that you'll be able to plug and play more or less straight out of the box with a variety of standalone GPUs like this, I will be so happy, because one of the things I've wanted to do for ages is set up a little single board server to, yes, act like a server, but also act as an AI tool locally. There's things like ChatGPT, there's things that generate images. I don't have that much of a use for ChatGPT at this stage, but for other projects of mine that I would love to have time to work on, one of the big problems is creating visual assets. And being able to run Stable Diffusion at home on a server that isn't going to completely clog up my main computer is a wonderful idea, and that's something I'd really like to try. But this is talking about AutoGPT, which is something a little bit different. Media streaming is absolutely something that, as I've mentioned, I already used my Zimaboard for. Retro gaming is something that hadn't occurred to me, but yeah, this would be a really powerful and nice small little machine for that. I'm going to leave it at that for today, simply because there's more I could talk about on this page, but we're going to be coming back to it when it launches. I was pleasantly surprised with the Zimaboard, and that isn't to say that I was expecting it to be bad at all. Looking at the specs of it and given how much it cost, I was thinking, oh, it'd be a handy little thing. But I've used Raspberry Pis and different ARM-based SBCs as servers before, and they've been functional, serviceable, but there's been no real benefit other than the lower power draw over just setting up any old computer to be a server. Zimaboard's one of the first times I've got something out which is a network tool that I got it out of the box, plugged it in, followed their 4 or 5 instructions to get it going, and I've just not thought about it since. And to me, no matter how much of a DIYer you are, you do want some things in your life that are pretty DIY, but are very easy to get up and running. And as I mentioned, this is x86, so is that. It'll be easy enough to run whatever operating system you want on it as well and do it completely DIY. So yeah, Icewhale have impressed me so far. We'll definitely be coming back to Zimaboard a lot as this funding campaign gets going. But for now, as always, if you want to find out more about it and know when it does launch, you can put your email address here, click subscribe, and you will get emails about just this crowd supply campaign, not other ones. Yeah. Just before we end the show, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is an article I saw on the always fantastic CNX software about Sipeed's new 4 devices that they are releasing. I say new 4, one of them isn't new, but they're all very exciting. Now, if you're not familiar, Sipeed are a company that have been putting out RISC-V devices for a while, and their RISC-V system on module is something that got a few people quite rightly excited. Well, that system on module has now found its way into a few devices that, if you are into both DIY culture, but also the idea of making semi-consumer devices that are very DIY in their nature, if that's such a thing, this will interest you. So, as mentioned, here is CNX software, and here is the Sipeed. Well, we already know about the Sipeed SBC. It's actually a baseboard for their system on module. The system on module is something that I can't remember if we did talk about it at the time or not, but quite a while back they released a system on module, which is a RISC-V entire computer on an edge connector. If you're familiar with the NVIDIA Jetson line, the Nano and all of those, you will be familiar with this kind of form factor. And their Pi A, or whatever it was called, Lychee Pi 4A, is essentially a baseboard that adds a couple of Ethernet ports and USB-C ports and everything you need in order to turn it into a single board computer. This is stuff that we have known about and that we have already talked about perhaps on the show. I always forget what actually makes it into these shows and what doesn't, because we have such a time constraint for what we can put in the shows. I almost wish I could do a secondary show somewhere which was just all the stuff that has never made it into Electromaker shows, because I get too enthusiastic and put too much into shows and have to edit so much out. Anyway, This is something that we already knew about. The cluster, the pad, and the console are all new, and they're all very, very exciting in and of their own right. I'll give a very brief rundown here, but as I say so often, you'd be far better served to go under this video, find in the description of this video, or if you're listening to this as a podcast, in the show notes, and heads to the CNX software article, where it goes through in a lot more detail than I'm about to. One other quick note just before I go ahead, something I had earmarked for this show, but just there was no time for, but is mentioned in this article, so it's great. You can find it in the same link in the description. Linux 6.5 is given some support to this particular quad-core RISC-V processor. If you click this link, you can find out all the notable changes in Linux 6.5. Once again, fantastic article, CNX software. Now, the Lychee Cluster 4a, and I'm going to say lychee because I'm assuming it's pronounced lychee like the fruit. If I have that wrong, please do correct me in the comments. This is up to 7 slots for those system on modules that we were talking about. This allows you to make a RISC-V cluster, and as it says, up to 7 LM4A slots for LM4A modules, with TH1520 4 times C910 at 1.85 gigahertz, i.e. these quad-core system on modules, and a total of up to 112 gigabytes of LPDDR4X RAM, and up to 869 gigabytes of eMMC flash. This is obviously just summed all together the capabilities of the system on the modules. And then the cluster itself has a gigabit Ethernet port, and it says also a separate gigabit Ethernet port for slot 1 only. If you're interested in clusters, which is something I'm definitely interested in, and in fact it's something I'm hoping I get to fiddle around with at some point quite soon. I don't want to say anything more than that. This seems like a really fun way of doing it. Now, it's at this point I do have to mention that unfortunately, as far as I know, there is no way of getting a hold of any of these things as yet. Maybe we need to be patient, as none of these RISC-V devices are currently selling. They'll be all sold on the Sipeed AliExpress store, starting with the Lychee Cluster 4a scheduled to launch next week. The Pad 4a and the console will be available in September and October. They mention a $299 price tag, but it's unclear for which device that is, and you can buy a $20 coupon for $10 on their website or something like that. I probably won't be doing that. That sounds a little complicated, but I will be keeping an eye on this and seeing what you can get. Now, as previously mentioned, the SBC version of this is already here. It is something that you can get your hands on now. It is available in their AliExpress store, and there is various versions of it here. This is the version I think that has everything that you need. This is the 128 gigabytes of eMMC, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and has the edge connector board, the system on module, and the baseboard as well. Again, I'm going to just link the CNX software article because you can find links to their store there. Okay, back to where we were. Sorry, I got distracted for a moment there. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't mad and this thing was already available. So that's the SBC version. Here is the cluster version. Now here's where things get very interesting. The RISC-V tablet is something that I'm not saying I've been waiting for this specific thing, but a developer's tablet is something that I have waited for a while, and I don't know why, but there's just something about the idea of it being RISC-V that really appeals to me, because I don't own a tablet. I have a Kindle and I have a smartphone. And I've always wanted to get a tablet, but I've always felt like getting a very, very cheap ARM-based tablet, which is all completely closed down and not very customizable. It doesn't really appeal to me. But by the same token, I don't want to spend a huge amount of money on something that I might not use all that much. We don't know how much this will cost. But the idea of something which is a developer's device that can be turned into a consumer device with a little bit of hard work, that is completely mine, really appeals to me. And so yes, there's the tablet version of this, and it is a working tablet. There's a few things about it that we don't really know. It's got an 8,000 milliamp hour battery. We don't know how optimized that it's going to be to run on that. We don't know how long this will last. And there's interesting things like there's outputs. You don't really get tablets with things like HDMI outputs and all this kind of stuff. This really is like a handheld tablet computer with a RISC-V processor. So yeah, I do find that quite interesting. Now here's the one that I think a lot of people will get really excited about, the Lychee Console 4a. It's a portable Linux terminal with a keyboard and a 7-inch display, as it says there. It's a mini RISC-V laptop, really mini and small, and it's just a hacker's delight. I can understand why people will be really excited about that. So the specifications: same system on module, has a micro SD card slot, an M2 SSD support, the 7-inch 1280 by 800 LCD with capacitive touch. There is a little demo here on the CNX Software website. And the SciPede says the Linux console supports Debian or Poly OS, and it can run VS Code. And you're seeing it being used here with the touchscreen. Yeah, it's just a really fun little device. And it seems like it is relatively capable. Again, it's once you get into the laptop form factor, you're going up against a lot of different things. I understand that. This isn't going to replace a consumer laptop, but if you're interested in a very unique looking device for developers or enthusiasts, yeah, this is something that really appeals. Between this and the tablet, I find it very difficult to find something, which one I would like more. Anyhow, all the information you need will be in this article. There's also the original announcement thread on X, which I'm never going to call it X, it's Twitter. It tells you there's a fair few replies if you are signed into Twitter. I guess I am not on this particular browser and account. You can find a little bit more information on that. But as always, almost everything that you would need to know, including all the specs, is in this fantastic article from CNX Software, which I will be linking in the description of this video. So that was our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so very much for joining me. The Electromaker podcast will return, as always, with the next Electromaker show that will be next week. I can't remember if I said this in last week's show or not. So just to be absolutely certain, if any of you are the people who were the anonymous donors to my charity thing that I did recently when I ran an ultramarathon and I was raising money for Mind, I just want to say personally thank you. I have made a video which thanks everyone by name, but of course if you're anonymous it won't mention your name. That will be going up on the Just Giving page. I'll be very interested to hear what you thought of this week's show. What do you think of the Zimablade? You can join our Discord or drop me an email to let me know, or you can head to the YouTube video, of course, and leave a comment there. What do you think of the Zimablade? What do you think of those new RISC-V machines? The tablet looks very interesting to me, and if I was going to find something to kind of mess around with development, that really does appeal to me, simply because it's very portable, it has a battery built in, it has everything already built in and a screen, and it feels like something that would be quite fun to try developing with, but I don't know. I'd be interested to know what you think of it all. Anyway, with that said, I think that is everything for this week. I hope you're having a fun, safe and creative one, and I will chat to you very soon.